Good evening, everybody. I'm David Ainsworth, Head of Communications at the United Nations Secretariat of the Convention on Biological Diversity. Our apologies for the delay in the beginning of the closing press conference. The plenary went a bit longer, and they're going through closing statements at this point in time. So we should have the Executive Secretary, Elizabeth Maruma Mrema, and the co-chairs, Basile van Havre of Canada and Francis Ogwal of Uganda, here very, very soon. They will take questions. I understand that basically most of our viewers are going to be here online, so please enter your questions in the chat, putting in your name and the name of your organization. I have colleagues who will be sending me these questions, and then I'll read them out to our different panelists. Just a matter of information is, so today, Sunday, June the 26th, is the last day of this fourth meeting of the open-ended working group of the Post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. Activities began on the 21st of this week, and they've had 6 meetings so far. The fourth meeting follows a combination of in-person and online meetings. The first meeting of the open-ended working group took place actually here in Nairobi in 2019. At that meeting, it really consisted of the gathering of ideas together that eventually became the shape of the framework. Governments then met in Rome in February of 2019 and then put together another set of ideas that eventually formed the basis for the zero draft of the Post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. And the zero draft was a text written by the co-chairs, by Francis Ogwal and Basile van Havre, and that was again taken up by the parties. The process for the negotiations came to quite a pause, however, afterwards. With the global COVID-19 pandemic, all meetings were suspended under the convention process in the in-person format. However, a series of online briefings, a series of online webinars, and indeed the first part of some of these meetings were conducted online to move the process forward. Delegates then met in Geneva of this year in March for a meeting that combined both the meeting of the working group as well as a meeting of our subsidiary bodies on implementation and on science, scientific and technical assessment as well, and that took place in March. That produced the text that came to this meeting that was addressed by the parties. And so the parties here were not looking at the zero draft, they're indeed looking at an annotated, marked up text. Those of you who are online, if you wanted to look at the text results, I invite you to go to the website, cbd.int, and if you click on the first slide on the carousel, it will take you to the official meeting page. On that meeting page in the documents area, you will find the CRPs, or the conference room papers, and the L documents that were adopted this evening. You will note that in the text there are a number of brackets and there are a number of areas of redundancy, and that's one of the issues that you can address to the Executive Secretary and the co-chairs is how will governments work on those as they move forward towards COP15. Because as you know, the idea is that this working group's mandate is to produce a text that is then to go to COP15 to be adopted there at that meeting. Another note about COP15, for those who've been following, indeed that the COP15 was meant to be held in Kunming, China, but due to the ongoing concerns about the pandemic, that has not been possible. The government of China did indeed hold a first part of COP15 in Kunming, but largely in a virtual format with a number of local participants from China, but then with most governments participating online in that case. That first part had a high-level segment which featured a number of heads of state and ministers commenting and providing bases. It produced the Kunming Declaration, which was a declaration that supports the principles and ideas behind this ambitious post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. The government of China also announced the Kunming Biodiversity Fund, a fund worth, I believe it was $150 million US dollars. That is the basis to provide support to developing countries for their activities. The second part of COP is now going to be held in Montreal, Canada. The Government of Canada, as host of the Secretariat offices, stepped forward and agreed to provide the hosting of this meeting in Montreal. The meeting will take place December the 5th to the 17th, so that's 2 weeks at the end of the year. I know we all know that it's late in the year, but it's in some ways the only spot that remained available to carry out given the rest of the meeting schedule taking place over the course of the fall. But the texts that we have here are meant to be addressed and dealt with by that particular meeting later on in December. So I'll give you just a couple of minutes. Again, my apologies. I'll leave the stream running and I'll stay here, but we're still waiting for the arrival of our guests. I do encourage you to put your questions in the chat because my colleagues will make sure that I get a look at those questions and we work it here. See, we've already got one from Hans Thomas Krumenacker from Reef Reporters. But I'll be looking forward to receive other questions. If you bring those forward, we can have them ready and lined up for the Executive Secretary and the co-chairs to handle. Thank you very much. So, ladies and gentlemen who are waiting online, and those of you here in Nairobi, my apologies for the delay. We're still getting the final remarks completing in plenary, so we should see them very, very soon. I believe at this point in time, Basile van Havre, one of the co-chairs, is delivering his closing remarks, so he should be here very soon. The plenary hall is only a few steps away here from the press conference room, so they should be arriving very, very shortly. So you'll see them here quite soon. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for your continued patience. As I said before, the plenary is just finishing. We're going through closing statements now. At this point in time, they're doing closing statements from civil society organizations, major stakeholders, private sector actors, that sort of thing. And it's quite an extensive list because, as you know, the interest in and need to engage with the variety of stakeholders is very, very important. And so we're taking time to go through those statements. Rest assured, we'll have our panelists, Elizabeth Maruma and Mrema, the Executive Secretary to the Convention on Biological Diversity, Basile van Havre from Canada, and Francis Ogwal from Uganda, the co-chairs of the Post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework negotiating process. So stay tuned, and if you'd like, please do enter your questions into the chat. My colleagues will make sure that they are passed on to me so that I can ask those questions of the panelists as soon as they arrive. Thank you. So, ladies and gentlemen here in the room and online, it's come to my understanding that we have finished the events in the plenary room. So in a matter of moments, the Executive Secretary, Elizabeth Mrema, and the co-chairs, Basile van Havre and Francis Ogwal, should be making the way very, very soon. Thanks. Thanks so much. Great, ladies and gentlemen. So as you can see, the co-chairs have arrived, Basile van Havre of Canada and Francis Ogwal of Uganda. They're here. We're just waiting for the Executive Secretary, Elizabeth, Maruma, and Mrema. So what you can do is you can begin to enter your questions in the chat. My colleagues will make sure they're sent to my way. I have received 2 questions so far, one from Hans Thomas Krumenacker and one from Megan Rowling of Thomson Reuters. Given that we're a little bit behind and we've also got a tight time schedule, I don't think we'll have opening statements from the panelists. I think we will go directly towards questions. So I would encourage all of you to enter your questions in the chat right now so that we're ready when we begin. Thanks. Okay, great. Okay, thank you very much for your patience. I guess that's also a sign of your eagerness, those of you who are still in the room and those online. Hi, I'm David Ainsworth, Head of Communications for the United Nations Secretariat of the Convention on Biological Diversity. And welcome to this closing press conference for the 4th meeting of the Open-Ended Working Group on the Post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. We have 3 panelists here who will take your questions and provide you answers. We have, at the end of the table, Elizabeth, Maruma, and Mrema, the Executive Secretary to the Convention on Biological Diversity. To her left, we have Francis Ogwal, who's one of the co-chairs of the Post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework process. He is from Uganda, and beside me is Basile van Havre, who is the other co-chair from Canada. Given that we're a little bit behind, I don't think we'll go with opening statements. So what I'll do instead is I'm going to move right to questions. I'll go back and forth, questions here, questions online, and then questions to the reporters here. So I'm going to start with a question that comes from Hans Thomas Krumenacker, who works for Reef Reporters out of Germany. And Hans Thomas's question is, can far-reaching goals be achieved at all with another round of negotiations at the last minute? Or is it not just a matter of preventing total failure with an agreement at all costs? So a very blunt question there to people on the panel.
Maybe I could start, and it's a pleasure to have a question from Hans, and I'm looking forward to see what he writes after that. Let's not talk about this being a last round. The meeting, the 5th meeting, is part of a larger process where we have been tasked by the conference here to do some preparatory work. So we will be working with a number of experts, our co-leads, etc., and some members for the Bureau to prepare a document. So that's not a question of preventing total failure at all. This is a question of moving forward. I think there is a very clear message coming from all that they want to get a good framework, and they want to have some preparatory work done. So I'm looking forward to this period. I'm looking forward to the work ahead. And I think it's a very wise choice to have added a few days ahead of the COP, so we can have the right level of document and the right level of issues brought to ministers. In parallel to the work we'll be doing, I also heard a very clear call for some political leadership and a call for engaging at the ministerial level. So I'm also looking forward to that. Francis?
Yeah, I think in addition to what you've said, Coach, on my side, I must say that my coach and I remain optimistic that this task we are going to accomplish, because we are just trying to gauge the level of engagement here and the level of commitment that the parties and stakeholders have shown. Of course, the big disappointment would be that we've not yet again got maybe to the level that we had expected here, but really come November or December, especially December this year, I think we shall have a framework that will be in good shape for the COP. So we are hopeful that delegates are going to deliver this. They have made progress here all the same. Yeah.
Thank you. To me, biodiversity is so important to fail. And the fact that the framework to be adopted in December is a long-term framework that also indicates the length of the discussions and what others may call limited progress here. It is so important that delegates need to ensure that what will finally be adopted is something which can be implemented and make a difference at all levels up to the local community. So we cannot afford to fail, and equally very clear from the negotiators, especially all the sentiments we had at the closing, that they are not ready to be associated with a failure. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. I think I'll take a question from the room now. Are the colleagues here in the room ready to ask a question? Oh, yeah, we'll need the microphone, actually, pardon me. I think it has to be turned on. Thank you very much. It's a bit of a self-service in this, in the conference room today. There it is, it's active. Go ahead, please.
Of course, we have been here for the week, and as I think one of the speakers said, maybe the outcome is not what perhaps was expected. So we are leaving Nairobi with still a document that is heavy on brackets, some added in Nairobi which were not there earlier. Are we going to give the rest of the teams that will be working on this maybe heavier workload going on to COP15? And even, we know COP15, that's a high-level meeting, even where heads of government, states and governments are involved. Are we dragging quite a lot of workload there, or how much really can the other intersessional meetings in between accomplish in having a cleaner and more refined document that can now even call the attention of the political leaders?
Let's be clear. There is a relatively significant amount of work in front of us. I think Francis and I were chatting with Elizabeth a little bit earlier and making jokes about canceling leave this summer. There is a significant amount of work. That work is doable, and we're here to do it. So count on our resolve and on the resolve of all the delegates here to work through that pile of work. We are creating a plan, and this is starting tomorrow for Francis and I. We're not stopping, so we are meeting tomorrow morning, and we'll start drafting that plan and starting to do that work. But that is clear. There is a lot of work, a lot more than what we thought.
Yes, I think, again, let's look at Nairobi on the positive side of things, not necessarily that he has not done so much. But when we were in Geneva, and for the records, we never came out of there with any clean text. We didn't. But here we have. Here we have. So that is just an indication that progress is going to be made. And I think perhaps if the delegates had, if this meeting was more than the 6 days, you don't know if it was going to go to some days next week, perhaps there could have been a lot more changes. But it only had the days it had, 6 days. Maybe we also again underestimated the time element to it, that we could have done what we wanted to do within 6 days. So there is something positive to take from here. And the fact that they have started coming up with a clean text, it means that spirit is beginning to grow up, and I think that is what we shall be aiming at when we are cleaning. Now, by the time we go to COP, we want to see how much of that could be there, because we are going to have a pre-COP kind of meeting again, where we're trying to see whether we can really narrow down and have something much more presentable to the ministers. So this gives us some hope, for sure, it does. Because as I told you, no clean text came from Geneva. Here, even some of them are slightly reduced. They are not necessarily as bulky as the Geneva one, although there are still square brackets in there, but you find the text is a lot perhaps smaller. And there are even some other alternatives given are even much, much shorter. So I think the stage is set for some more positives to come. Yeah, thank you.
As the co-chairs indicate, indeed, we've made progress here. From Geneva, actually, the meeting in Geneva, there was hardly any negotiation. It was basically hearing what the negotiators wanted to see on the text. So it was more for a compilation of what they wanted to see. Negotiations have begun here, and we can see the brackets have been drastically reduced. And the fact that negotiations began here, and this is where now they've heard each other. Geneva was just listening and putting it down, listening and putting it down. But here now there's been that interaction. And therefore, each knows the perspective of the others. And as we move forward with the plan the co-chairs are going to plan, clearly the roadmap is there to reduce more of those brackets, because now the negotiators know exactly where each other is coming from and where the compromises can begin to emerge where there are still brackets. So progress has been made, limited, but comparing with Geneva, a major progress. But of course, as human beings, we always want to run and not walk.
Great, thanks. So Gloria Dickey, I think your question's about what's going on, but one question Gloria wants to do, she wants to confirm, she says, right, so is it the case that we have 2 targets that were fully reserved? Maybe someone from the panel could let the reporters know, which ones were, you could say, are fully reserved, or resolved, pardon me.
Yeah, I think I'll try to remember it, and we can again cross-check in case we have made some. It is 19.2 and target 12. Yeah. So if you cross-check, and again, I think there was one that some positive remarks came from.
And there is a couple of goals too.
Yeah, in just in the plenary.
Yeah.
There was, yes.
And those are not necessarily a small one. 19.1 is about resource mobilization. So that's a huge piece. That's not a small one.
The clean text was 19.
Yes, 19.2 about,
19.2.
about capacity
19.2.
development.
The rest of capacity.
Correction, 19.2, please. Otherwise, don't get us on 19.1. It was on 19.2 on capacity building and awareness raising and so forth. Yeah.
So maybe I'll move over towards another question.
And 12.
So I'll move to a question that relates, because we talked about 19.1 and resources. So Megan Rowling from the Thomson Reuters Foundation, her question says, she says that, so CSO observers say that finance is a sticking point and there's been little progress. And she asks, are rich countries being asked to make funding pledges at or before COP15 to secure the GBF?
It's important to point that the whole picture of financial resource is a lot more than what we call direct government aid. What we're trying to see is now is the aligning of all financial flows. So definitively, direct government support play an important part, and we've seen recently over the last year and a half, quasi-doubling already in terms of commitment. But that is small when you compare to what is needed, and that is small to compare with what is available when you remove negative incentive, when you look at the private sector investment, when you align multilateral development bank. Elizabeth, I'm sure, will be talking about her work with financial disclosure, and all those are very, very important points. So yes, the number on the request side and on the need side are daunting, but it is now a different time, and we're looking at that in a very different way.
Yes, I think so far we would say yes, there's indication that we could have a number of pledges coming, maybe especially at COP itself, because during the first part of this COP that was mainly held virtually, I think China made a pledge, and I think others will be coming in. So at COP, we may hear a little bit more than that. So there is the hope that biodiversity could have a number of, contributions coming in. But again, as co-chair has said, really the amount of damage that has already been caused is enormous. And we just need to come to terms with the real that a lot of resources is needed if we are going to try to really recover or put biodiversity back to that recovery path that we are all talking about. There are studies that is being done to try to estimate for us that amount needed. It could be in the range of about maybe 700 billion, but you can just see that, what is needed. So we are part of the problem as human beings, and we are not going to run away from being the solution as well. Even if we keep postponing and keep giving less and less to biodiversity, the problem magnifies. In the long run, we are going to pay a lot more. So inaction now is much more costly in the future. If 700 billion is needed now and we don't mobilize that, 10 years down the road, it might be double that or more. So we need to just come to terms with the loss that is happening and put money to conserve biodiversity. Thank you.
Indeed, for the framework, after its adoption, to really be effective in the years to come, it will need resources. But resources, not just money. And as one of the co-chairs has indicated, it's not just public funding. We know some of the activities, even a good chunk of resources also need to come at national level. Not necessarily direct funding. It could be as the result of mainstreaming biodiversity into all sectors of the economy and therefore reduce duplication and multiplication of the same activities, use the core benefit aspect. One of the co-chairs have indicated repurposing, redirecting harmful subsidies to biodiversity into harmful, nature positive, biodiversity positive activities. And the framework was actually estimating if at all 500 billion per year spent on harmful subsidies, if that is redirected into sustainable biodiversity, already the resources are there. We know the GEF, Global Environmental Facility, for the first time in history, it has increased its resources to 5.3 billion for biodiversity. So commitments are coming in, and we believe by the time the framework is adopted, more will come in, but we also want to see more coming in as the result of national activities. We know, for instance, in many countries like Kenya, tourism provide a big percentage of the national GDP of the country. If part of that resources accrued goes back to tourist management, again, we can see the resources there and reduce that dependencies from outside, but really being innovative and getting the resources within. Thank you.
Let me add something, David. From what the Executive Secretary just said, something we should bear in mind, and I think this, most people could be knowing it, but we need just to emphasize it, is that the benefit we get from biodiversity is global. It is not confined to a specific country. Look at a country which is having challenges on managing its forest, maybe due to population increase and so forth, and there's a degradation going on. But maybe that same forest ecosystem, it's critical for the water catchment. That could be producing you the rain. The rain could be going into some rivers that is international in nature, like, for example, River Nile, and that river flows all the way to countries, to the Mediterranean Sea. And yet, the tank, the granary, name it, is somewhere, located somewhere. So this benefit simply implies that we need really to recognize that we shouldn't leave loss of biodiversity to a certain country to grapple with. We are just messing up our own future. So this is why when you invest in biodiversity, there's a lot more benefits that you get. Carbon sequestration, just the ecosystem and other aspects of biodiversity, doing it free, in bracket, free, because if you don't destroy, you get the services you need. So this is the whole thing that about biodiversity, really. People tend to give it less attention for reasons I've never understood. Less investment. Too much about climate change, little about biodiversity. Now, that loss of biodiversity is not going to be slowed down, it's not going to be halted. It's not like just something you are driving in a car and you say, halt the loss. How do you halt the loss if you're not taking action there? We need to take action on biodiversity.
Great, thank you very much. I've got a number of questions online that I think I'm going to put together, so apologies to the reporters out there, but I'll mention. So I'll start this sort of cluster that we'll all look together, where Gloria Dickey from Reuters, she says that given the score brackets that remain, what can be done between now and COP for a chance at an agreement? But I want to combine this with questions from Stella Paul from IPS News, Lee Wei from the Earth Journalism Network in Malaysia, and also Mohmand, and they're asking the question, will there be a Working Group 5?
So I'll start by the end. There will be a Working Group 5, provided there is funding and facility. But I know a lot of people are working hard to make that happen. But clearly, we get a mandate from the working group to organize a meeting. It's going to be a short meeting right ahead of the COP itself. But what is important is also what is going to take place before. So we are going to build a work plan, Francis and I, together with the Secretariat, and we're going to start to engage a number of the people that work with us in our team. We call them co-leads. They lead several parts of the framework and are experts on various subjects, to engage bilaterally with parties and try to explore what are the solutions. We're going to bring back everybody together and write a document. We were asked to do a document that will probably look at what can be simplified in the framework, like where there is duplication, not changing what was negotiated, not at all, but trying to polish that document into something that is more easy to understand, and then identify avenue of solution and try to see if there is way to regroup various things. And that's what the negotiators are asking us. They want that work. We will do that work. We will engage with them so that when they get again together in Montreal, they have the piece in front of them that enables them to move forward fast.
I think Co-Chair has basically said it really. I'll not add much there. These brackets in the coming days and months before we have the pre-COP meeting, we are going to try to see how we combine our heads to really look at what the Co-Chair said. Much of them sometimes is just people insisting on certain words which might be, meaning the same thing, and they keep adding them, piling them. For us as co-chairs, we are very impartial, we are very neutral, so when we are looking at the text, that is how we look at it. We don't have particular biases on anything, just to look at how consistent, how cohesive, how complete this text could be. That is what guides us. We are not considering particular things in particular when you are looking at this text here. And of course, with support from the co-leads who were in the meeting and the Secretariat, that's how we're going to work.
The co-chair have confirmed, yes, there's the 5th working group, but before the 5th working group, the co-chairs are going to develop that roadmap between now to the 5th. So clearly in between, negotiations, consultations will continue, just to be, and even bilateral among the stakeholders themselves, those will continue throughout as part of already beginning to see where compromises can be, and as a way also to better understand why there are differences. So the negotiation process will continue. It's only that by the time of the working group 5, that's when everything will become public in terms of knowing exactly where the compromises have been reached and confirmed.
Good, thanks. And just before I go to our colleague from Chinois here, Gloria Dickey's pointing out that in a press conference yesterday, it was a briefing I did, we were saying that there was not going to be a 5th meeting of the working group. But so we just want to reassure to her that this is indeed a 5th meeting of the working group. And so the parties have asked for it, and so that's what needs to happen. Our colleague from Chinois who's in the room, would you like to ask your question? Nope, he's fine for now? Okay, very good. We don't have any more questions, although the one where maybe we'll gather, and I'll just get the last round of opinions from everybody. Overall, Stella Paul is asking this, and even Gloria Dickey, and they're saying that, well, so what gives you hope that this other meeting of the working group will go differently than what happened in Nairobi? So give your comments, all three of you, and that'll be our closing.
I'll repeat a little bit what my colleagues have said. We moved from Geneva, which was a time of statement and just opening the door to negotiation, to heavy negotiation here. And now we're at the point where we know where everybody is and we know what the stakes are. And the fact that we have delegates that have been asking us to set up a work plan is encouraging. Because the last thing you want is delegate leaving the meeting and saying, well, we'll see you later. So I'm quite encouraged. I've seen a lot of progress. I've been approached by many people saying, we did not get to clean text, but now I understand where so-and-so are. So there was obviously a lot of progress made here. Thank you.
Yeah, and we are going to keep going back to this roadmap that we are going to develop, but in it also we are going to try to come up with some guidance really on how we could keep improving from what we have achieved here, and then take that to the 5th meeting of the working group. Actually, at some point here, we didn't even at some point thought there was going to be a clean text. We were just saying, okay, I think the best we're going to do here is keep reducing perhaps the text and remain with as many of those, the scrupulous will keep remaining. But then, that is what we have seen, that clean text is possible. So I think, as we said again, delegates will take on the positives from here to give us more clean text in the meeting that we are going to have, before COP. I think that fifth meeting also is going to be the one that is just at the periphery of COP, back to back with COP. It takes place before COP, so you will see that there could be a lot of interest now for us to really hand over to the ministers or brief our ministers with something much more meaningful than now, because we cannot go to the ministers with, I don't know how many square brackets in a text. So the presence of the ministers, as we now know it, coming in, and the COP day is knocking at the doorsteps, I think that will give delegates the momentum to really salvage the situation, and we see more progress at that meeting, the fifth meeting of this working group. Yeah.
What we are seeing also from Nairobi, which has not yet happened, and what the co-chairs have already informed the plenary, is that before the working group 5, there will be smaller meetings, the colleagues, the friends of the chair, and all this will help in reducing those brackets before then they present their report and recommendations to working group 5. So we can see the development from Geneva, many brackets to reduce, but then even to reduce the number of negotiators. The actual negotiations cannot happen in a plenary. Not surprising that even during this week, we have had several colleagues to deal with specific topics and report back, several colleagues, and that's how compromises can be reached. And now that is what now the co-chairs will lead during this period before December. Thank you.
Yeah, and even then, another layer to the friends of the colleagues was the informal. There was even another smaller group, informal, of the friends of the co-chairs, of co-leads. So that helped them to bring a text that was, eventually taken up by the contact group. So actually, if you get negotiators, as long as the parties have agreed to it, that they can be fewer in number, you find that it is better that way to agree and narrow down text than a big room of about, 200 people, 500. It's just not possible. So that is how we are trying to, from the lessons we've learned here, we are going to keep using those methods to see that we try our best to deliver something better at COP15. Yeah.
Great, thanks very much. I'll try to squeeze in a couple of short little ones. This one comes from Megan Rowling of Thomson Reuters Foundation again. She says, green groups have been saying that Brazil has been blocking progress across the board. Can you confirm this, and if so, explain how? I put that to you.
Actually, that's not my impression. No, and in fact, I would say Brazil has had a constructive engagement in many places. They've talked to me and they've approached me. They've showed willingness to compromise. So I would say that is not my assessment. I would say also in a more general way, I don't think there was anybody blocking here. I think I've seen many parties. Yes, they have different views and they need to find common grounds, but I haven't seen anybody blocking or having a totally negative attitude at all.
Yeah, I don't know where that information has come from and how it eventually developed, but here we can tell you that we've not seen that. It could have been seen by anybody, either in the plenary or Brazil has been helpful here. We've not seen, this. I'm just shocked to hear that, but I think wherever it came from, that is not true. And for us, this is why we are saying that going forward in the next round, the very last one, the fifth meeting of this working group, there is actually, everybody is now there on board, because we have succeeded to go through much of the text of the framework, the whole of it. Nobody has blocked the other here, no one.
I fully agree with that assessment. I mean, to me here, the discussions have been very productive, proactive, and even when we're seeing the youth with placards outside, has all been positive, reminding that this is our future. Remove brackets. It cannot be business as usual. It cannot be the same. These are just reminders. And to me, I take them as their really constructive engagement in the process.
Excellent, thank you. Let's hear, Michael Salzwedel asks, can you confirm that only 2 texts have been finalized at this meeting? Well, we addressed this earlier, that indeed targets 12 and 19.2 were indeed, 19.2, we keep making that mistake, all of us, don't we? Target 12 and target 19.2 are clean text, but as been pointed out, a number of the other texts have had rationalization and consolidation. We're going to bring it to a close. These panelists have had a long week ahead of them, so thank you very much for your efforts this week. Thank you for joining us on the panel, and I'm sure members of the media will be chasing you down over the next few days as well. Thank you for joining us, everybody. Have a good night.